finding journalists who will speak out about their experiences, certainly in the tabloid press, isn't actually that easy because their careers are massively affected by it. So we really have to thank Richard for stepping out, because I know he's still actually persecuted by the Daily Star on a fairly regular basis as a result. It's incredibly brave. Okay, our next speaker. Guess who this is? Here's somebody who turned the tables on the tabloid press by recording their conversation with them, where said journalist Paul McMullen alleged that editors at the Daily Mail and News of the World had ordered journalists to engage in illegal phone tapping. A very clever reversal of roles, who's now become a champion for the cause. Hugh Grant.
Hello, well, I've only got 5 minutes, and so I really wanted to just take those 5 minutes to stress the positive things. I think, you know, a lot of progress has been made since last July. I think that the first 2 modules of the Leveson inquiry have shone a lot of very disinfectant sunlight into a lot of very infected corners. I think that as a result, people are around the country starting to realise that this whole thing is about more than just phone hacking, that it is about corruption of police, corruption of public officials, the intimidation of elected politicians, and basically the emasculation of 5 successive British governments. So in effect, it's really about the corruption of democracy here in England, or Britain, the so-called crucible of democracy. And that, however abhorrent the idea of a state-run media is, and it is utterly abhorrent, it's nevertheless increasingly obvious that we have been living for about 30 years in a media-controlled state, and that is equally abhorrent, and it's a disgrace that nothing's been done about it up till now. So as I say, I wanted to use these minutes to stress the positive things. Unfortunately, that is completely against my nature. I'd much rather dwell on the negative. And I'll be quick, but the big negative for me, the big worry, is that we, in all the flurry of pyjama parties and police horses and dodgy texts and dodgy emails, that people may come to think that this whole business, this whole scandal is confined to one news organisation. And that simply isn't true. It's an impression, of course, that is being very much promoted and promulgated by non-News International news organisations. But, as I say, it simply isn't true. All the evidence shows that unethical, illegal, criminal behaviour was widespread throughout the entire tabloid end of Fleet Street. And evidence of that, for evidence of that, you don't really need to listen to some of the anecdotal evidence from Leveson. I gave some myself when I was banging on about the plummy-voiced woman. You don't need to even listen to McMullen, or to, even worse, Rich, talking about what their experience of inside the industry. You don't even need to decide whether you particularly believe the evidence of, for instance, Piers Morgan. You just have to look at the database containing the Motorman files. Motorman, for those of you who perhaps have forgotten this particular inquiry, was the Information Commissioner's inquiry into the activities of a private investigator called Steve Whittemore back in 2003. Steve Whittemore, his business, he ran a number of sort of con men and blaggers who, in return for money, were able to obtain personal data on individuals from the Police National Computer, from the DVLA, from British Telecom, and from various mobile phone companies. And when the Information Commissioner published his report into this in 2006, he set out a league table showing which papers had used him most, and used this convicted criminal most. And oddly enough, News International is nowhere near the top. Way above that are the Associated News, the Mail and the Mail on Sunday, and the Mirror Group papers. So there is this great stack of unexposed, unpublished evidence about widespread illegal activity going on papers outside News International. Activity which the Information Commissioner himself described as serious as phone hacking, if not more serious. So why is it not coming up more at Leveson? Why, when victims groups there or hacked off ask the inquiry to spend more time on it, do they get a no? Well, the inquiry keeps saying this is historical, but it's hard to see really how it can be historical when it was going on actually more recently than the hacking of Millie Dowler's phone. It's hard to see why it's historical when there was a cover-up and still is a cover-up. It's hard to see why it's historical when, as far as anyone can see, these newspapers still have all this personal data on all these victims, and may indeed be still using it. It's hard to see why it's historical where, even after the conviction of Steve Whittemore in 2005, two newspaper groups for sure went on using him. The Daily Mail went on using him up until 2010, the Express until 2007. So for a lot of us, it's astonishing that this material is regarded as historical. I think I've gone on too long, but there's a bunch of ranty questions I wanted asked about this. Let me just do a couple of them before I sit down. For instance, during the investigation into Steve Whittemore and his prosecution, why was not a single journalist who commissioned this illegal activity ever prosecuted? Why were they never even investigated? Does that mean that despite the written law in the Data Protection Act, that journalists somehow have a de facto immunity to prosecution? If that's the case, we should be told about it. We should be told why that is. Are they under-resourced at the Information Commissioner? Are they scared of journalists? What exactly is going on? Given that it was managing editors of newspapers who actually wrote the checks to Steve Whittemore, and in the case of, say, the Daily Mail, put them down in accounts under travel and expenses, why is it that the Leveson inquiry has not asked a single managing editor to come to the inquiry and explain what happened? And was it the fact that when various newspaper groups lobbied the then Home Secretary Jack Straw very hard to not enact what the Information Commissioner suggested, which was much tougher penalties for breaches of Section 55 of the Data Protection Act, including custodial sentences, was the fact that they lobbied Jack Straw very hard and won, he caved in, to do with the fact that A, they'd all been at it, and B, it was an essential part of their business model. I think that's a question that really needs to be asked more vociferously than it has been asked. I think this is important because if questions like these go unanswered, I believe that there's a danger that Lord Leveson will come to the end of his inquiry, and in the face of his recommendations, a bunch of non-Murdoch newspapers will just say, well, we didn't do anything, Gov. And I think that there are a lot of politicians who will either believe that or who choose to believe that and will try to get the recommendations of Leveson watered down. Thanks very much.